items I'd like to go over. I'd like to invite everyone to introduce themselves in the chat as we get started, rather than introduce everybody through the video. This will help alleviate our agenda. And so please invite everyone invited, please introduce yourselves in the chat session. We tell everyone that you will be on mute until the breakout groups to make sure that we can hear all the speakers. And we'd like to thank you in advance for your patience with the technicalities on this Zoom meeting. And I'd now like to pass it over to Maria Angelica Ramirez for translation instructions.
Muchas gracias. Thank you very much. Good afternoon. I will do this introduction in English, then my colleague will do it in Creole, and then I will do it in Spanish. Buenas tardes, buenas noches. My name is Maria Angelica. My pronouns are she and they. And today, my colleague Rose and I will be providing interpretation in Haitian, Creole, and Spanish with MARP language services to ensure that we all have access to this important conversation that will take place here today, and also to ensure that we can express ourselves in the language that we choose. Today, we will be using the Zoom interpretation feature. So if you're joining us from your computer, at the bottom right-hand corner of your screen, you're going to see a globe that says interpretation. When you click on it, you can choose Spanish if you want to listen and participate in Spanish, English if you want to participate and listen in English, and French if you want to participate and listen in Haitian Creole. Now, if you are joining us using your phone, when you touch the screen in your Zoom on your phone, at the bottom right-hand corner, there's 3 dots that say more. When you touch the dots, you choose language interpretation, you choose the language that you prefer, and then you press done. We're going to drop the instructions in the chat if you'd also like to access them that way, or share them with someone who would find interpretation useful today. What else? Now I'm going to pass. Oh, yes. We ask that you please also name yourself, including the language that you prefer. So if you can please add at the end of your name the language that you prefer. If you prefer English, if you could please write ENG for English, so that you the organizers will know where to place you for the small groups. Thank you, and I will pass the mic to my colleague Rose.
Bonsoir tout le monde, merci Maria Angelica. Et donc, nous devons juste faire instruction ça en créole pour que nous soyons capables de comprendre. Tant pis, prêtez attention. Donc, moi, c'est Rose. Moi, je fais partie de l'équipe MARB Language Services avec collègue moi, Maria Angelica, qui parle faire interprétation en espagnol, moi-même en créole haïtien. Donc, on est là, si que nous avons utilisé fonction interprétation en bas écran, si nous avons utilisé un ordinateur, nous avons un petit boule qui semble un globe terrestre, nous cliquons sur lui pour être capable de joindre French. Et maintenant, nous pouvons attendre créole haïtien. Comme nous n'avons pas gagné Haitian Creole, donc nous mettons pour French. Donc, nous choisissons, mais nous attendons créole haïtien. Si nous avons utilisé le téléphone portable, nous, la pas être utilisant différent. En bas à droite écran, nous pouvons gagner 3 petits points, nous cliquons sur 3 points, ensuite nous pouvons language interpretation, interprétation pour langue, nous cliquons sur lui, ensuite nous choisi anglais, espagnol ou bien créole haïtien ou French. L'on fin choisi l'anglais, tant pis en haut à droite écran, nous pouvons done, nous cliquons sur done pour être capable d'entrer dans la salle interprétation. Si nous pas cliquer sur done, nous pas attendre l'interprète là. Donc, c'est très important pour nous songer ça. Et donc, si que nous avons plus d'informations ou bien si nous avons un problème, tant pis, regardez dans le chat là, nous mettons instruction déjà dans le chat là. On autre bagage que nous avons demandé nous tout, tant pis, nous pas gagner un petit groupe activité, quoi, plus tard. Nous demandons pour nous écrire non nous, après nous écrire non nous, introduire tête nous mettons 3 lettres K, R, E, qui signifie créole, pour que l'œil peut faire activité ça, pour être capable de choisir, mettez dans la salle le monde qui parle créole. D'accord? Encore, si vous avez un problème, mettez-les dans le chat là, puis on est capable de nous. Merci, bonne participation. Angélica?
Gracias, Rose. Buenas tardes, mi nombre es María Angélica, mis pronombres son ella y ellas, y hoy mi colega Rose y yo estaremos proveyendo interpretación en criollo haitiano, en español y en inglés con MARB Language Services para asegurarnos de que todos podemos tener acceso a la importante conversación de hoy y también a la participación en este espacio en el idioma que decidamos. Vamos a proveer la interpretación usando la herramienta de Zoom. Entonces, si nos están acompañando desde su computador, van a ver abajo a la mano derecha de su pantalla un globo que dice interpretación. Cuando ustedes le hacen clic, pueden escoger español si quieren escuchar y participar en español, inglés si quieren escuchar y participar en inglés, y francés si quieren escuchar y participar en criollo haitiano. Ahora, si se están conectando desde su teléfono, luce un poco diferente. Cuando tocan la pantalla de Zoom en su teléfono, ven 3 puntos abajo a mano derecha que dicen más. Cuando pulsan los puntos, eligen interpretación de idiomas. Ahí eligen el idioma que prefieren y después tocan finalizado. Les vamos a pedir el favor de que por favor agreguen el idioma que prefieren en su nombre cuando estén cambiando su nombre en la reunión. Si por favor pueden agregar ESP como español a su nombre para que los organizadores sepan en qué grupo pequeño agregarles. También estamos agregando estas instrucciones a lo largo de la reunión en el chat. Si conocen a alguien que está en esta reunión que querría usar la interpretación, por favor compartan estas instrucciones con ellos. Muchas gracias y ahora le paso el micrófono a los organizadores. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria and Rose. Now I'd like to pass it on to Ralph McLeod from Catholic Chairman Human Development for opening prayer.
Good evening. I'd like to also join in the welcome for this very important and maybe even somewhat historic gathering. Many of us are joining this workshop because of our congregation as part of a local justice ministry organization. We're glad that you're here and each of your roles in building up a justice ministry in your congregation is important and essentially needed. Still others have joined today because of an invitation from your local diocese. In addition to the Catholic Campaign for Human Development, we like to recognize the Allegany, Franciscan Ministries, and the 5 Catholic dioceses who are co-sponsoring this evening's event. The Archdiocese of Miami, the Diocese of Richmond, Diocese of St Petersburg, the Diocese of St Augustine, and the Diocese of Columbus. We invite your congregation to join in and form a justice ministry, to form a local justice ministry organization so that there might be a stronger voice for justice in those individual communities. We welcome you to this important and critical work of Laudato Si, the care for creation, the care for our shared home. I'm proud to be associated with and work for the Catholic Campaign for Human Development in Washington, D.C. And we support this tremendous effort, recognizing the fact of how the environment is in a way deteriorating around us and how essential it is for us to act, for people of faith to act in that behalf. So with all of that, let us begin this important, historic, this gathering in prayer, and let us pray. All-powerful God, you are present in the whole universe and in the smallest of creatures. You embrace with your tenderness all that exists. Pour out the power of your love that we may protect life and beauty. Fill us with peace that we may live as brothers and sisters, harming no one. O God of the poor, help us to rescue the abandoned and begotten of the earth, so precious in your eyes. Bring healing to our lives that we may protect the world and not prey upon it, that we may not sow pollution, but sow beauty, that we may not sow destruction, that we touch the hearts of those who look only to gain at the expense of the poor of the earth. Teach us to discover the worth of each thing, to be filled with awe and contemplation, to recognize that we are profoundly united with every creature as we journey towards your infinite light. We thank you for being with us each and every day, and especially today, God. We ask that you encourage us, we pray, in our struggle for justice, love, and peace. Amen.
Amen.
Deacon?
Amen. Okay. Thank you, Ralph. My name is Deacon Paul Copey. I'm from St. Michael the Archangel Catholic Church in Clearwater. I'm a member of the FAST Ministry organization in the Diocese of St. Petersburg. Many of us are here because we are connected to a local justice network that is part of the DART network. Similar to my organization, FAST, each of our affiliate organizations bring together thousands of people of faith to do justice. We identify specific problems that we want to work on, research solutions to these problems, and then negotiate with public officials to see that these solutions are implemented. We believe that in doing justice is a core part of our faith traditions, and yet one that is often overlooked. Our vision is to build up the work of justice within each of our congregations so that justice is an integral part of our culture. Our congregations across each county join together to have a more powerful voice in standing up for our values of fairness and justice. This past year, 17 of our justice organizations decided to begin looking for ways in which changes in the environment are affecting our communities, especially the marginalized communities. We will start sharing stories of our problems of how floods, heat, pollution, mold, hunger, storms, and hurricanes during our house meetings in the next month. We have an important role as people of faith to make our communities to be more just and caring for creation. This means we are not only finding ways that we can be more reflective and individually working on making decisions that care for creation, but that we will also hold our communities accountable for just practices. Policies and practices at every level, including at our city and county level, are making decisions that can either help or hurt our communities, especially impacting the most marginalized parts of our community. Pope Francis wrote Laudato Si in 2015 and is addressed to all of us. It is an inclusive dialogue about shaping the future of our planet. We are grateful to have leaders here, many from different faith traditions. In Laudato Si, Pope Francis calls the Church and the world to acknowledge the urgency of our environmental challenges and to join him in embarking on a new path. This encyclical is written with both hope and resolve, looking to our common future with candor and humility. Our Laudato Si workshop is a way for our parishioners to understand the connection of our faith and caring for creation. We hope that as a result of this workshop, you are able to join in with your local justice ministry organization to be a part of an action team, to host or attend a house meeting, and to energize your congregation around the values that Laudato Si teaches us, to care for each other and to care for our common home. We hope that this could be a model that you could use to have a similar Laudato Si workshop in your own congregation, and we will provide materials for you to do so. And we believe that we will all leave here feeling stronger and bolder in our understanding of our faith and the climate crisis. I'd like to now have Josette share briefly about why caring for our common home is so important to us.
Thank you, Deacon Paul. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our Laudato Si Workshop. My name is Josette Josue. I belong to the congregation of St. James Catholic Church, located in Miami, in North Miami, affiliated with PACT Miami in the Archdiocese of Miami. How my community is impacted by climate change. As you all know, climate change is very harmful to everyone, especially to the minority communities. So my community of Little Haiti has been very impacted. And even before I started, it's with an heavy heart that I'm trying to participate in this meeting tonight, because my home country, Haiti, is in the middle of a tragedy right now with the hurricane, with an earthquake, 7.2 or 3, I don't remember again. And affecting this has been affected many lives, and our people are suffering. In Little Haiti, situated in the center of the city of Miami, we are less to be impacted by rise sea level, because that's one of the issue caused by climate change. For that reason, we have wealthy investors who just hijacked this part of our neighborhood called Little Haiti, where many Haitian residents lived long time ago. Some of them more than 40 years. So that said, price of the rent are rising up, properties value are going up, and what is going on now? They have to move, they are moving out, Haitian residents are moving out, while wealthy communities are moving in. You know, many of the decisions that we make about where we live are because of the way we are impacted by storms, flood, drought, and heat. As this community, the Little Haiti community, lived in a place where, you know, the climate change seems to be, will impact less, you know, this area where we lived. So now we are chased in this part of the city. Other families have moved from Little Haiti because property has become more valuable because it is on a higher land. Many of the decisions that we make, as I said before, you know, are impacted our health. We have also the problem of transportation, homelessness. We have handful with problems. And now, as people can stay on their land or where they used to live, it's a very, very big problem. What I would hope that everybody care about, the hurt, because we have to care about each other. We know that the planet Earth is our common home. So let's please try to come up with solutions good for everyone, each and every one of us. And it will be justice. Let justice rule. Thank you.
Thank you, Josette. Now we'd like to ask Father Alfred to give an introduction to Laudato Si.
Father Alfred, you're on mute.
Unmute yourself.
There we go. Okay. Good evening, everyone. My name is Alfred Chaffee. I'm a Catholic priest in the Archdiocese of Miami, teach biology and bioethics at St. Thomas University, our own diocesan Catholic university. So a brief introduction of Laudato Si. I have been given 5 minutes to do this. So I invite you to fasten your seatbelts, relax, and enjoy the ride. You know that Pope Francis was elected Pope in March of 2013. And in that same year, he published his first encyclical, but that was co-written with Pope Emeritus Benedict XVI. Pope Benedict was doing a series on the three theological virtues, and he had done charity already, and hope, and faith was missing. So he had the draft of the encyclical on faith, Lumen Fidei, faith illumines, faith enlightens, and then he retired. So one of the first things that Pope Francis did was to co-author that encyclical with Pope Benedict XVI in 2013. So technically that is the first encyclical Pope Francis, but co-authored. His first full encyclical is going to be Laudato Si in 2015, all right? So really it is his first truly full encyclical. And there were other documents that he wrote between those 2 years that are more apostolic exhortations and so forth. But I just want to say for the benefit of the audience that an encyclical in the Catholic Church is the highest level of papal authority in what we call the ordinary magisterium of teaching. The name itself is indicative. Laudato Si is ancient Italian, medieval Italian for praise be. We finished the sentence, praise be my Lord, for brother sun, sister moon, mother earth, etc. That is known as the Canticle of the Sun, attributed to St. Francis of Assisi, right, in the Middle Ages. And it is significant because Pope Francis elects that name precisely of Francis, inspired by St. Francis of Assisi. So we know he has a passion, if you will, for nature, for our Mother Earth. And so that is the title of the encyclical itself. I want to point out also that this Laudato Si encyclical is the fourth in the live series of documents from the Vatican. Pope Francis makes that point early on in the encyclical. What do I mean by the live documents? There are 3 other documents from the Vatican that have the word life, vitae, in their title. Humanae Vitae, Donum Vitae, and Evangelium Vitae. Humanae Vitae was the famous encyclical of Saint Pope Paul VI in 1968, basically saying no to contraception and yes to natural family planning. Donum Vitae was an instruction that came out from the Congregation of the Doctrine of the Faith in 1987. Then the prefect of that congregation was Cardinal Ratzinger, who later became Pope Benedict when Pope John Paul II died. And Donum Vitae says no to in vitro fertilization as another attack on the beginning of human life, and again, yes to natural family planning. Finally, Evangelium Vitae is the Gospel of Life by St. Pope John Paul II in 1995. Not only reaffirming the sanctity of human life at its beginning, but also at the end of human life. So essentially, no to euthanasia, no to physician-assisted suicide, practically no to death penalty, and again, yes to the sanctity of all of human life at every stage of development. So Pope Francis makes the point that this is the fourth in the life encyclicals, going beyond human life. The fact that all life on earth is sacred in the sense that it is a reflection of God's creation. And we're put here on earth not to destroy creation, but to preserve it. So we are stewards of creation, and the book of Genesis reminds us of that. Briefly, Laudato Si has 6 chapters. It is about 100 pages long, but it's in a booklet form, so that comes to about 50 pages in a regular 8.5 by 11, all right? 6 chapters, the first 3 chapters are challenges, and the last 3 chapters are solutions. I want to highlight chapter 2, the first part, the gospel of creation. Again, this would be like a 5th gospel, not written in sacred scripture, but written in nature. And we are the only ones with reason that can interpret that gospel. Nature is speaking to us to preserve it and to take care of it, because we are the only species that can destroy nature. And then on the second half, I want to highlight chapter 4, which is integral ecology, going beyond the environment, also economic and social ecology. In other words, it's about relationships. And I presume that you have all read it, but if you haven't, I want to encourage you to pick it up and read it. It has been translated into all the European languages, also Russian, Chinese, and Arabic. You can download it for free from the Vatican website in your favorite language. Finally, I have half a minute, so I want to point out that this is also a pro-life encyclical. There is this perceived chasm between those who take care of the environment and those who take care of human life, and that is another instance of misinformation. Consistency for human life requires that we protect human life from conception to natural death and also protect the environment. You can look at paragraph 120, for example, in Laudato Si, where Pope Francis specifically condemns procured abortion and says, paraphrasing, that it is inconsistent to hold, to try to protect the environment and not to protect human life from conception to natural death. So this encyclical really puts it all together for us, the sanctity of human life and the sanctity of creation, and we have the charge to protect it and not to destroy it. And now I have to move forward and briefly introduce Archbishop Wensky, Archbishop Thomas Wensky, and then after him will follow Sister Ilia Delio, Franciscan sister. In the interest of time, I refer you to the package, the agenda package, where you have a fuller description of the biography of Archbishop Wensky from the Archdiocese of Miami and Sister Delio. And now I ask you to join me in welcoming Archbishop Wensky. Thank you.
Thank you, Father. Thank you, and welcome to all of you for this important workshop. You know, earlier this month, the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change issued a key scientific report on the pace of global warming. And for those of us who live in Florida and are concerned about rising sea levels along our coast, the news was not good. So 5 years ago, Laudato Si was published by the Pope, and he called climate change one of the principal challenges facing humanity in our day. And so here we are 5 years later, and Laudato Si remains very relevant to any discussion on climate change, or as the Pope would frame it, on creation care. Now, in Laudato Si, Pope Francis, as popes have done in previous social encyclicals, attempts to engage the world in a dialogue. In doing so, he presents a vision of the human person, of our place and our dignity in the world, which the Church recognizes as both fallen and redeemed. Thus, it is a vision that is rooted in the gospel and enshrined in the Church's moral teachings. Now, the Pope is not a scientist. He does not speak as a scientist, but he speaks as a pastor. And in doing so, he wants to emphasize that whatever affects the human person and human flourishing does have ethical and moral dimensions. And therefore, it is a proper concern to the Church and her pastors. Now, the Holy Father declares that we need only to take a frank look at the facts to see that our common home is falling into serious disrepair. But he's more than just a prophet of gloom and doom, but he doesn't pull any punches in assessing the problems we face. He says, human life is grounded in three fundamental and closely intertwined relationships: with God, with our neighbor, and with the earth itself. And Scripture tells us that these three vital relationships have been broken, both outwardly and within us. And this rupture is what we call sin. The harmony between the Creator, humanity, and creation was disrupted by our presuming to take the place of God and refusing to acknowledge our creaturely limitations. In our relationship with the earth, the Holy Father zeroes in on the impacts of pollution, lack of clean water, toxic waste, and climate change. But he's just as frank about the state of our human relationships. And so just as we favor laws that limit the danger of pollutants damaging our sensitive ecosystems, should we not be as concerned about the toxic waste of pornography and its effect on the human ecology of the young? We need to protect the rainforest, but can we hope to care for the gifts of the earth if we refuse to care for one another? And so the Pope emphasizes that our ecological challenges weigh heavily on those who can least carry the burden, the poor. As Josette spoke earlier, little Haiti, the poor are being displaced as richer people seek to move to higher ground and move away from the encroaching sea coast. Now, a throwaway culture that the Pope criticizes very strongly in this encyclical and other places, a throwaway culture does not just pollute our rivers and our oceans with discarded plastic. We throw away human beings as well, including life in the womb. We neglect the disabled and show little respect for the lives and the contributions of the elderly. So Pope Francis calls us to both a natural ecology as well as a human ecology, for there is also a pollution of the heart that's shown, for example, in human trafficking that has become a massive global industry. To undertake this great work of creation care that integrates a natural ecology with a human ecology, we must restore all our relationships in a full way. Our relationship with God, our relationship with our neighbor, and with the earth itself. Laudato Si is a rich, complex document, one that is much more than just a treatise on climate change. I came across somebody that said that to make Laudato Si just about climate change would be like making the Thanksgiving dinner feast about the cranberries. Our human nature, like Mother Nature itself, is a gift of the Creator who designed his intrinsic order, and in this way provided the instructions for us to consult. In Manila, when the Pope visited the Philippines after a devastating typhoon, he cited a popular adage or proverb that said, God always forgives, we sometimes forgive, but when nature, creation is mistreated, she never forgives. But in spite of this, the Pope really does weave together a hopeful message in Laudato Si. He tells us that the Creator does not abandon us. He never forsakes his loving plan who repents of having created us. Humanity, he assures us, still has the ability to work together and building our common home. And really that is what we're about tonight in our justice ministry, to work together, to building our common home, to enhance human flourishing on this earth that has been entrusted to us by a loving Creator God, and we hold it in stewardship because we have to hand it down to future generations after us. Thank you very much.
I guess I shall go next. Thank you, Archbishop Wenski and Father Chaffee. Those were very, very insightful remarks. I am going to share some slides with you that will hopefully convey my remarks for today. If I can find them, here we are. Now I do have a number of slides, and I hope I don't rush through them. I think all that we're talking about here is extremely important. I think Josette's remarks should really cause us to think and reflect on what are we doing as humans on this gift of Mother Earth. Care for creation in a world that is, as Archbishop Wenski just pointed out, is getting hotter. Global warming is a serious crisis, and unless we really make a significant change, we do not have a sustainable future. Archbishop spoke about Florida. Here is a river in California. In 2013, it looked rather robust. In 2015, the levels were depleted. In 2021, it is a dry, barren land. And we can begin to see the same phenomenon across the US and other parts of the world if we don't start to change how we're doing things. Again, as Josette and others pointed out, the poor are being affected by global warming disproportionately. This conversation we're having is not new. Pope Francis's wonderful encyclical is not novel. We have had a crisis in the environment since at least 1962 and largely before that. Rachel Carson in 1962, writing on pesticides, said that the most alarming of all man's assaults upon the environment is the contamination of air, earth, rivers, and sea with dangerous and even lethal materials. We've known about this now for decades. Trying to get my slides to move here. What is some of the problems is, why have we not made significant efforts to change in a new direction? Part of it is how we have thought about religion and earth. Lynn White, in his very controversial essay of 1967 on ecology, said that we have treated nature as something separate from us. We have been very anthropocentric, very human-centered, so that we have thought about salvation and the things of faith only about humans and not about the earth itself. White said, since the roots of our trouble are largely religious, and here he meant both Protestant and Catholic Christianity, he said the remedy must be religious as well. We must rethink and refeel our nature and destiny. And that's why it is important that the church enter into this conversation wholeheartedly. In 1992, a group of scientists noted that we are close to committing crimes against creation. They said a great change in our stewardship of the earth and the life on it is required if vast human misery is to be avoided and our global home on this planet is not to be irretrievably mutilated. And therefore, I see Pope Francis's encyclical as, you might say, culminating many decades of serious concern for the welfare of the earth, but he does place it in the context of our creation story. As we well know that, the law of prayer and the law of belief is the law of life. How we pray, what we believe is how we live our lives. Part of it, I think, and this is to no fault of anyone, but we have a medieval construct still about our faith, God as the creator and sustainer in a fixed universe, where we do, even as I listen to how we frame this discussion, there's an emphasis on God and the things of God, in a sense, over and above the earth. And so the earth is, on the great chain of being, lesser, in a sense, still good, but in a sense, a lesser good than humans and angels, and of course, the perfection of God. We know since after the Middle Ages that religion, and here both Catholic and Protestant, really took a turn from the rise of modern science. The church has always been, in some ways, a patron of science, but it's had an ambivalent relationship to modern science. Science itself is a bit of a culprit here because it pushed God out of the universe. God was an unnecessary hypothesis, and I think one of the problems that we're facing today is that we have collapsed the place of mystery in the universe. René Descartes, the famous philosopher, split the world of ideas, the mind, from matter, the physical world. And so really we became thinking people with bodies. And so we're sort of detached, the body and the mind. And this has given rise to, I think, what I call a crisis of transcendence. We have no place to lose ourselves. We don't think of matter or the things of nature as the place of mystery. And so the self-thinking subject became the center of the cosmos. And instead of finding mystery in the natural world, like Francis of Assisi did, we look for things in other worlds, technology, cyberspace, consumerism, and all the addictions that we now have today. Yet, I just want to briefly say that our modern science, since the early 20th century, is renewing the place of mystery in nature. We live now in a Big Bang universe, one that is very ancient, 13.8 billion years old, and that will continue to expand for billions of years. We live in a world not of inert matter, but we live in a world of energy. And matter, we now know, is a form of energy. And therefore, what we learn today from science about nature is that nature is composed of deeply entangled fields of energy. If we look to our fundamental physical roots, we live in an undivided wholeness. And this wholeness of matter is dynamic. The word evolution, which is unfortunately tied to Darwin, but much larger than Darwin, really speaks to the dynamic, changing process of the material world, the physical world. Life unfolds, new things happen. But I think what we realize today in our universe is this is not a static, fixed cosmos we live in. It is an unfinished universe. We are being created. God is actively alive in our world. Life is emerging toward new life, which is, of course, the gospel message. And life evolves by creative power. We humans are, in a sense, the culmination of what nature has produced, so to speak. God is acting all through this process and, comes to explicit consciousness in the human person. It means that our acts make a significant difference into how we will proceed in an evolving universe. So many in the biological systems today realize that, self-organization, nature itself is holistic and works as systems. Nature on its own can do quite well without us humans, I might add. We're sort of the problem, not the solution sometimes. Father Thomas Berry noted that the ecology movement can exist in its own right, and it has its own religious dimensions. And in his view, it does not need biblical verification or consecration, since care for the earth is in itself a sacred task. And he said, the reason for Christian aversion to the story of this universe is that it's been told simply as a random physical process, when it needs to be told as a spiritual process. What God is doing in and through this dynamic universe. The universe story, the earth story, the life story, and the human story are all a single story. The Jesuit Teilhard de Chardin asked, who will give evolution its own God? A God who is deeply related to this world. And here I think, without going too much into Teilhard, what we can do, and I think if I were to say, what should we do on the parish level? We need an incarnational commitment. This is the core of our faith, that God has become flesh, God has become matter, and draws all things through love into that fullness of being. So we don't find God in opposition to matter or independent of matter, but through matter, which is, of course, what Francis of Assisi did. Similarly, Teilhard de Chardin, like Francis, found God, the absolute, in the very materiality of the world. As one person wrote, he seemed to sink down into matter, the primordial essence from which all energies and to which all returns. Francis of Assisi himself spoke to flowers, and he saw himself as a brother to birds and worms and trees. And both Teilhard and Francis of Assisi saw that this universe has purpose and has meaning. And this is something I think Christians do not highlight sufficiently, that Christ is first in God's intention to love, that this universe is not blind, it's not aimless, it's not just mere matter. It has an aim. And therefore, Teilhard spoke of us being in Christogenesis, the birthing of Christ, a dynamic presence of Christ rising up through this creation. And so Teilhard spoke of Christianity as a religion of the earth. And I think this is something we need to, in a sense, maybe enter into a little bit more fully. In the future, the only religion, he said, possible is the religion which will teach us, in the very first place, to recognize, love, and serve with passion the universe of which we are a part. This is very consonant with Pope Francis saying love of God, love of neighbor, love of earth. Father Thomas Berry again thought we need a new religious orientation based on our new universe story. That revelation and, in a sense, what God is doing is fantastic from the very beginning of this universe. The whole thing is, in a sense, a rising up of the spirit as we become more complex beings. And therefore, the ultimate concern of the human must be the integrity of the universe, upon which the human depends in such an absolute matter. Care for the earth sounds like we're in charge, but the fact is, the earth cares for us. And if we destroy ourselves, it's likely that, simple biological life will continue on. But God is inviting us, in a sense, to open up to where God is in this dynamic process of life. And here I think the liturgy can be a great teacher. Again, our New Testament, our gospel, speaks about life in Christ as being a new creation. And I think that's what liturgy, in a sense, hopefully does for us and needs to call to mind, that we are part of a new creation, not just taking care of the wounds of the old creation, but we are to be forming something new. That's what it means to be a Christic person. And therefore, ritual is a sacramental or symbolic act that acts to Christify the world. And all we're talking about here, and this is where I wonder sometimes liturgically, are we forming a new consciousness of what it means to be a follower of Christ? One scholar says, when the level of our awareness changes, we start attracting a new reality. Certainly, we don't have to go any further than the Gospels to realize this is true. Jesus brought in a new awareness of the world in which he lived. And again, another saying, I think very consonant with our gospel message. If we want a different world, we must become a different people. Sometimes we want to solve these problems of the world without changing ourselves. But to be a Christian is to be changed. It's not about changing the world, it's about changing ourselves. And therefore, I think with our creeds, we need a new creed. We need to be brought to commitment and attention to believe in the deepest goodness of things, in the relationship of all things, that this earth has a future in God, that we are part of this future, and that this future is the relational unity of all things in God. Teilhard himself, recognized that the Eucharist should be a central sacramental invitation to awake to a new consciousness, that over every living thing, which is to spring up, to ripen during this day, as Teilhard said, this is my body. Christ is offered up through everything, through our efforts, through our works, through our sacrifices. And as we grow into this Christ consciousness, it means to enter into a new relationship with persons, with the earth, and with the heart of creativity itself, in which God then becomes more revealed. Again, as we, I think Pope Francis is calling out to us, we must take responsibility for this home that has been gifted to us. And that is an incarnational commitment. If you truly love where you live, then you will take only your share. There's nothing worse than a household that's a complete wreck, right? And to take our share means we need to begin to live without possessing. And that means not only possessing material things, but we need to let go of our biases and our judgments and the way we form our opinions of everything and everyone. I think the practice of simplicity, practicing the virtue of enoughness, opens our eyes that God is truly here. God is not someone watching over us. God is one of us. God is revealed in this now. And therefore, this Christ, whom we profess as the center of our faith, is our lives, right? As St. Teresa prayed, Christ has no body now on earth but yours. So we have to take responsibility that this human community and the natural world can be seen as a unified single community with an overarching purpose, and nothing less than the exaltation and the joy of existence, the praise of God, and the participation in the great liturgy of the universe, in which, as St. Francis realized, the whole universe is the cathedral of God. And so I end with Bonaventure, the great Franciscan theologian, for whom creation is indeed not only the starting point for God, but the ultimate place in which we will, in a sense, find our culmination. Bonaventure prayed, therefore, any person who is not illumined by such great splendor in created things is blind. Anyone who is not awakened by such great outcries is deaf. Anyone who is not led by such effects to give praise to God is mute. Anyone who does not turn to the first principle is a fool. Open your eyes, alert your spiritual ears, unlock your lips and apply your heart, so that in all creatures you may see, hear, praise, love and adore, magnify and honor your God, lest the entire world rise up against you. So I will stop there. I'm looking at the time and I realize that we are probably running out of time, but anyway, those are my remarks.
Thank you, Sister Ilia. That was a very good presentation. At this time, I'd like to introduce Monsignor James Bodie, who's going to discuss our breakout groups.
Unmute yourself. Jim, unmute yourself. Okay.
Well, my name is Monsignor James R. Bodie, and I'm the pastor of Christ the King Catholic Church in Jacksonville, the Diocese of St. Augustine, and I belong to the Justice Ministry of Eye Care. And we heard the beautiful reflections from Archbishop Winsky and from Sister Leo on the Laudato Si. And one of the reasons that I'm interested in seeing us live out Laudato Si is to recognize that we are all connected to the world, that we all must be have a responsibility for our environment. We are now going to break into our small groups to reflect on what we just heard in our own communities. We will have 15 minutes to introduce ourselves and to reflect on 2 questions which are listed in your agenda packet. The first question is to reflect on the quote from Pope Francis, and that's in your packet, which you can read yourself. And the question is, where has your community put extreme consumerism over the common good, our common home? And for me, one place that I see Jacksonville put extreme consumerism over our common home is that as I was growing up, I remember in our neighborhood, they built a trash incinerator that put ash in the air that polluted the air and would cause respiratory problems for people. And so like instead of looking at a common place where to place it, they place it into a African-American community. And then our second question is to use our imagination to answer. What do you imagine our community to look like when we are caring for creation? For me, when my community is caring for creation, we see an openness, the recognition of the uniqueness of all of us to one another. I see the recognition of caring for creation that Christ the King School has demonstrated by receiving that green ribbon for the environment. Our students are very much aware of the importance of the environment. And so we will break out and then come back together for a panel discussion.
Deacon Kopi, back to you.
Okay, thank you. I hope that everyone had a meaningful conversation in your small groups. I know we likely all needed more time for discussion, and we are hopeful that your discussion will continue in your parishes and justice ministry organizations. And we invite everyone as part of the workshop to participate in local house meetings taking place across our diocese. We are grateful to have several of our organizational leaders, Marina Lopez, Dr. Leanne Clements, and Father John DeMello, along with Sister Ilia Delio and Archbishop Thomas Wensky, to conduct a discussion around some of the myths of scarcity, fear, and despair, and how these show up in communities, practices, and policies. And we're also going to hear some of their reflections on imagining our communities when we do care for creation. We welcome our panelists for joining us tonight. Because we're a little behind schedule, we're going to have 7 minutes for each question. The first question is, how has scarcity, fear, and despair been used to rationalize practices and policies around caring for our common home? And I'd like to ask Marina Lopez to first respond to this question, and then we have time for the others on the panel to respond. Again, we have about 7 minutes to reflect together on this question. Marina?
Hey, friends, thank you for inviting me to share with you, what I have been thinking. And I want to anchor my answer on what I see in Charleston. As many of you that share your experiences, and as Josette explained when we started, we are in a coastal city. So we see the same problems that many of you have already talked about. But I wanted to talk about the scarcity, and I relate that to the way that we are development, that we are allowing development in our town. The land is scarce, and the only value that is guiding right now the development is just profit. So we are allowing development on lands that, lands that uses to be creeks, that uses to be marsh. So we are destroying bird life, fish life, water quality. But not only that, we don't take care of Mother Nature, and we are not taking care of our friends and neighbors that has historically live on the neighborhoods that are so valuable right now. So we are pushing them outside of town. And when we don't push them, we are having terrible issues with flooding that is impacting our life. We are having around 80 days of flooding in Charleston, even when it's not raining. And that is affecting mostly the poor community. So when we see scarcity too about how we go through the solution of these problems, so we never have enough money for the poor neighborhoods and the things that needs to be done on those places, but we are discussing without any concern the money that we are going to spend to save the more affluent neighborhoods. So, scarcity is seen on these two things, the money driving everything, profit driving everything, and then how we allocate the resources that we have. And the way that I see fear and despair is that looks like we are just powerless, that we are kind of accepting this, like it is what it is, and the market is just the driving force. And so we see the despair on, the population that has been affected. And I said populations, I work on downtown, my full family works on downtown. So 80 days of flooding is impacting all of us every, all these days. But I think that this idea of that we are powerless, that we don't have nothing to do confronting these huge forces of the developers.
Thank you. Someone else on the panel like to respond?
I'd like to take a stab at it, if I might. So Marina, thank you so much for that. I was educated as a marine scientist, in fact, in South Carolina, and spent some time in Charleston and the surrounding areas, particularly investigating the salt marshes and creeks. And so I understand exactly what you're talking about. Those waterways protect the land inland from flooding, and also protect the ocean from pollutants that flow off of the land and into the ocean. And it's very easy for people to see that coastal environment, that waterfront property as the thing they want, right? As desirable, but to the detriment of the whole environment and to the detriment of the community. If you build on that salt marsh, you're taking away that buffer of buffer from sea level rise, the buffer from floods, from storms, as well as just a buffer in general. And you're also taking away that opportunity to cleanse the water as it goes back into the ocean, and in fact, destroying a food source, often for our poorest community members. who may really rely on being able to catch fish and shrimp and crabs just to feed their families, not to sell even, just to feed their families. And so, you know, it hurts me to hear that that development is destroying the very thing which makes that community, which makes that city, which makes that coastal environment truly valuable to all of us. So that's my my reflection anyway.
Okay, thank you. Sister?
Just a few different remarks, but I do appreciate what Marina and Lee are saying here. I think two things. One, I think we've become a very disconnected people, our minds, and it's a very complex world. We have built a very complex world for ourselves at a very rapid pace. And so we did not learn how to really live in this world adequately. And I think we're on this breathless, we're on a breathless treadmill, and so it's landed us in a very selfish type of mentality. We can just think about last year, when I think of the beginning of the pandemic, two things: water and toilet paper. I mean, the shelves were completely emptied within a very short amount of time because it's grab and take for me. And it was so symptomatic of the bigger problem with regard to the earth. Take for me first. Let me take care of myself first. And if I have anything left over, maybe I can help you. And that's a deep problem for us. We have no real sense that we really belong to one another, and we belong to one another on this earth.
All right, thank you, sister.
And I'd like to piggyback on that about like the selfishness, where people are used to taking from the earth, taking from the environment, not thinking about anyone else, or not thinking about what's happening. And when they do that, they don't realize how much harm they are bringing to the environment, to the earth. Many times as long as they don't see what is happening, but it is happening very slowly and gradually. And many times, unless something really is right in front of someone, just like when someone catch a cold, they may say, "Oh, it's just a cold. I'm going to ignore that." But we know if we ignore that, it may get worse. And I think the same thing with people treating the environment. They're so used to taking, so used to saying, "For me," and instead of saying, "What's for the common good? What's for my neighbor?" And when that happens, it's like the man in the scriptures, the gospel, that he had an abundant harvest. So he said, "What should I do? Instead of sharing it, I'll build bigger storage bins." And the Lord responded and said, like, your food, your life would be deprived of you. And I think people, that this whole thing about scarcity, like if the people come together to address that, they would see they could start working on reversing scarcity and looking at the common good instead of just myself.
Right.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Monsignor.
Okay.
We'll go to our second question, which is, what do we imagine our community to look like when we are caring for creation? And I'd like to ask Sister Ilya to be the first to respond to that question.
I think a Laudato Si community, if I could use that term, might look like something like a Franciscan community, in the sense that there's a mutual caring and a mutual sharing. And I mean, when I say Franciscan, truthfully, I think this happens in a lot of communities that are really healthy communities. The very word community by itself means living with, right? And having a consciousness of belonging to one another, that really are the fullness of our lives depend on one another. And so I think, that sense of a Laudato Si community, that the earth is part of our community, the birds, the air, the water. Here I go back to Francis of Assisi's sister water, and he really had a sense that water was his relation, he was related to water like a sister, brother wind. And it's not just, the water that's good for me. I'm just going to take all the water I need. That's a whole different level of thinking about things. And that's what I think a Laudato Si community means to me. It's we have put on a whole new way of seeing one another in the world because this gospel life has reshaped us. And that's what my hope is.
I think if I could say something about a Laudato Si community, if we go back to what Pope Francis was saying in Laudato Si community would be one in which relationships are restored. Relationship of ourselves to our Creator God, and our relationship to our brothers and sisters, and our relationship to the earth itself. Those relationships are broken, and we see that brokenness in many, many ways, whether it's the problems of racial turmoil in our country, in our world. If we see what environmental degradation happens because of the brokenness of relationships between nations. When there's war, people die, and the earth is scorched and oftentimes rendered useless. The Romans, when they conquered Carthage, plowed over Carthage with salt so nothing could grow there again. Kind of a dramatic way of illustrating that brokenness of relationships. And so, I think Laudato Si is a call to conversion. It's a conversion on several levels to our God, to our Creator, to His creation, and to one another. And that, I think, is we're not going to fix we're not going to fix the earth if we don't fix our relationships with our fellow man. If we don't again recognize the need of our fixing our relationship with God. It's all interconnected. We are all interconnected, and if we're going to solve the problems that beset us, we have to recognize that. Several years ago, I was helping a group unpack one of their missionary trips. They went to the Dominican Republic, and these are all middle-class kids, and they came back and they were all overwhelmed by the poverty that they saw there. They said they never saw people that lived in such poverty. But at the same time, they said, but they seem to be so happy. And I said, well, think about what you're saying. I said, those people are rich. They're poor in material things, but they're rich in relationships because they have brothers and sisters, they have cousins and aunts and uncles and grandparents and neighbors in that whole village that they know each other. So they're very rich in relationships. And I said to these people, I said, look at you guys are poor in relationships. You probably, you don't know your cousins because you live too far away from them. You probably only have one brother or one sister of that money. And your relationships are all virtual because you stay in your room and you're on your computer, you're on your phone, or you're on, and therefore you're watching a video game. So there's nothing real about your relationships. I think, the cure is readjusting or reconnecting with those relationships that make life meaningful and fulfilling.
Thank you, Archbishop. We have just enough time, about 1 minute, for one more comment.
I would like to
Marina.
I have hope that we are seeing, Sister Iria was talking about taking care of each other and taking care of Mother Nature. And we are seeing these examples of people taking care, protecting the marshes, but protecting the communities too, and taking care of each other and trying to have actually having a voice about these things. So I am hopeful about that. And I want to say too that we need to keep working so everybody has the right to enjoy Mother Nature too. We talk so frequently about how healing is to be on nature, on walking on the woods, going to the beach. We have many kids in Charleston that don't know the ocean because we don't have public transportation. So everything that we do, working on social justice, for having transportation, for having housing, is having an impact too in our right to care and enjoy for Mother Nature.
Okay. Thank you, Marina. God bless you. Thank you so much for the whole panel for being there and contributing, and a round of appreciation for all our panelists for sharing with us and sparking ideas and reflection for each of us. We do have important work ahead of us, and Ms. Charlene Brown from the Bread Organization in Columbus will be sharing with us on where we go from here. Charlene? You're muted.
Unmute yourself. There's a little button on the corner there. You know where the microphone is? Touch that microphone and take that. There you go.
Okay, thank you. All right, I also want to thank everyone for your reflections and just for being part of this event. It's been tremendous. My name again is Charlene Brown. I'm a member of St. Dominic Catholic Church in Columbus, Ohio, and a member of the Bread Organization here. Hopefully this workshop has helped everyone clearly see the connection between our faith values, the people around us, and caring for creation. The workshop is part of the Care for Creation campaign that each one of our justice organizations is taking on locally. My whole notion, I have to say, of environmental issues and who's affected by them has been rearranged just since Bread got involved. I'm from California originally, very environmental state, and I've experienced that lack of water that Sister Ilya pointed out. But here in Columbus, I've learned, for example, that I live in the fastest growing heat island in the country. We have too much pavement, not enough trees and green space. And you may have a major environmental threat close by without you even knowing it. A paint plant that is located 2 miles from where I'm sitting right now exploded back in April, killed one person, sent 8 people to the hospital with injuries. I have a friend who lives closer to that plant than I do, and another one who works just a couple of blocks from that plant. Fortunately, neither of them was hurt, but here's the problem. The Ohio EPA said no known hazard to human health or the environment was caused by that explosion, but we do not know what was released into the air or how people's health will be affected. Also, homes were damaged, and this is a predominantly Black area. These are not wealthy people, so paying for repairs will be a hardship for many of them, and that could cause still other problems. So what do we do about situations like this? Where do we go from here? Well, as people of faith, obviously we have to call for justice. Many of our dioceses and congregations are part of justice ministry organizations that offer us opportunities to take action. I'm going to tell you some ways you can help, and you go into the chat and fill out the form there with your responses. The first, you can join the sacred conversations we'll have this fall during our small group listening sessions. You can host a listening session or attend one. During those sessions, we are going to ask a specific question about how our daily lives have been impacted by issues like floods, heat, pollution, mold, food, storms, and hurricanes. Sharing these stories is critical, and it helps make the connection between climate and the role of our faith in taking action. So go to the form now and mark whether you are already planning a listening session or you're interested in being part of one. We need your leadership, and as you heard, we'll hook you up. Secondly, we hope that you got a lot out of the reflections and that tonight was a model for the kind of thing you could do in your congregation or justice network. We have recorded reflections and discussion questions available so that you can hold your own study. So mark the form and tell us whether you're interested in receiving materials for this kind of study. Third, our justice ministry organizations will be kicking off research committees to take action on caring for creation. It'll be important to have large, diverse groups of people investigating both the problems and the solutions. That research and the stories that are shared in our house meetings will determine the direction of our Care for Creation committees. So mark the form now to show whether you're interested in being part of your local team that will shape this work. We thank you all for your responses, and remember, all of us have a role to play in caring for creation. Now I'm going to turn things over to Fanny for our closing prayer.
My name is Maria Smedley. I am from Incarnation Church in Charlottesville, Virginia, the Richmond of the Diocese. Querido Señor, Creador del cielo y de la tierra, gracias por la riqueza que nos has dado. Sabemos que la tierra fue un regalo gratis a los primeros humanos y nos quedamos impresionados con la belleza que nos rodea cada día. Ayúdanos a reconocer este regalo y cuidarlo, ambos en nuestras vidas diarias y también en nuestra lucha por la justicia. Amén.
Amen. Father, you have given into our hands the stewardship of the wonders of creation. Padre, has dado en nuestras manos la mayordomía de las maravillas de la creación. We give you thanks for this evening and the ability to reflect upon this gift through the words of Laudato Si by our Holy Father, Pope Francis. Les damos las gracias por esta noche y la capacidad de reflexionar sobre este regalo a través de las palabras de Laudato Si por nuestro Santo Padre, el Papa Francisco. We give thanks for the reflections of Archbishop Thomas Wensky and Sister Ilia Delio and all our presenters. We give thanks for the work of those who have prepared this conference. Damos gracias por las reflexiones del Arzobispo Thomas Wensky y la hermana Ilia Delio y todos nuestros presentadores. Damos las gracias por la labor de quienes han preparado esta conferencia. We ask that as we go forth this evening, that the seed planted in the hearts of those who have virtually gathered might bear abundant fruit in our dioceses, communities, and our individual lives. Pedimos que a la medida que avanzamos que esta noche, que la semilla plantada en los corazones de aquellos que se han reunido virtualmente pueda dar frutos abundantes en nuestras dioceses, comunidades y nuestras vidas individuales. We ask this to Christ our Lord. Pedimos esto a través de Cristo nuestro Señor. Amén.
Amén.
This concludes our Laudato Si workshop. Thank you everybody for attending, and I hope you all have a very blessed and peaceful evening.